I never thought there would come a day when I would have to hear my own son, the very boy I raised with my sweat, my blood, and the health that is slowly leaving me, shout straight into my face such venomous words. You don't pay my bills, you're not my dad anymore. Those words tore through the air at dinner, sharp and merciless, like a knife plunged straight into my chest. I froze. The whole room fell silent. My wife, sitting beside me, kept her cold stare, her fingers still playing with the new ring she had just bought, not even bothering to speak up. My daughter kept her head down, her eyes wet and red, not daring to look at anyone. And I, the one who had carried this family through storm after storm, suddenly felt like a useless shadow in the very house I had built with my hands. How many men out there have felt what I felt at that moment? How many fathers have poured out everything, only to be denied by their children because they no longer bring home enough money, because their names no longer show up on the bills? This is not just my story. It is the collective pain of thousands, tens of thousands of men being belittled inside their own homes. And so I ask you, listening to my words now, have you ever treated your parents as nothing more than bill payers? Have you ever forgotten that behind every receipt, behind every payment, is a lifetime of sacrifice, a lifetime of struggle so that you could live with ease? If you have, stop now, pause, and hear my story to the end, and then look again at how you treat your father and mother today. That night, after those cruel words, I didn't shout back. I sat still, like a statue carved in stone. But inside me, a fire of fury was raging. I remember every detail. The yellow light hanging above the dinner table, the sound of cutlery scraping faintly, the smell of food turning cold. I saw my hands trembling, not out of fear, but from anger, from humiliation. Was a father no longer a father simply because he didn't pay the bills? Was a husband useless simply because he couldn't buy his wife another luxury handbag? Then what about all the years I broke my back on construction sites, all the endless night shifts, all the pennies saved, so that my children could go to school, so that my wife could live under a safe roof? Was all that nothing? Who truly understands men like me? Who cares about our pain, the ones burdened with responsibility but rarely granted sympathy? I know many men hearing this now are nodding quietly, because they too have lived, are living, or will live through the same injustice. Imagine this. You spend your entire life building a home, making sure your children don't starve, ensuring your wife doesn't struggle. You deny yourself every small joy, never once letting yourself relax, just so the ones you love can breathe easier. And then one day your child spits out words of rejection. Your wife of many years turns away coldly, even blaming you instead. How would you feel? Hurt? Humiliated? Angry? Let me tell you straight. This is not just a personal insult. It is raw injustice. Injustice toward fathers, toward men who have given up their lives for their families. The world may praise them, but inside their own homes they are dismissed, treated like excess baggage. And that is unacceptable. That night, when I returned to my room, I sat in darkness alone. I could still hear my wife's laughter through the door as she chatted with her friends about shopping trips. I stared up at the ceiling, my chest tightening. I wanted to scream. I am not an ATM. I am a husband, a father, a human being. But no one in that house could hear my voice. How many men have swallowed the tears back into their hearts like I did? How many have thought of leaving but came back because they couldn't abandon their children, because they were chained by responsibility and love? And how many chose silence until that silence turned into shackles that bound them for life? I share this story not to complain, but to warn. I want each of you listening or watching to ask yourself, how are your parents living right now? Are they being disrespected because they no longer bring in as much money as before? Are they being pushed aside because they cannot provide material wealth like they once did? If so, Please don't wait until they are gone to feel regret. Don't let cruel words become wounds that will never heal in the hearts of those who gave everything for you. I once thought men were born to endure, but today I realize silence in the face of injustice is not strength, it is complicity. And if you are witnessing your father, your husband, your brother being treated unfairly inside the family, don't be silent. Speak up. Show them you value them. Because sometimes a single phrase, "Dad, I'm grateful. I appreciate what you've done," can save a heart that is bleeding quietly. I still remember that night. After my son threw those words into my face like a sentence, I chose silence. But silence did not mean my heart was calm. On the contrary, it was in that moment I saw the clearest form of injustice exposing itself naked right inside my own home. A man can endure so much, but the moment he is denied by his own family, when no one stands with him, that is humiliation beyond words. The next morning I sat in the living room looking around the house. Every piece of that home carried my sweat, every tile on the floor, every chair, every lamp. Yet now I felt like an outsider, pushed out from the very home I had built. My wife came out of the bedroom, dressed up, drenched in perfume. She did not look at me, only asked coldly, "Are you going to work today? Don't be late. This house still has so many things to take care of." Her words were soft, but they landed like a slap to my pride. I wanted to answer, "Who has been taking care of this house from the very beginning?" But once again I swallowed it down. Have you ever felt that way? When your partner, the one who should be your spiritual support, turns her back, treating you as nothing more than a tool to bring in money. When you lose material power, you also lose your voice in your family. That is injustice. And it is not only in my family, it is happening in thousands of others. The greatest injustice is not poverty, but when your effort is denied, your love is diminished. I have seen many men around me fall into this. They work until their bones ache, but when they return home, there is no thank you. Only complaints, comparisons, even insults. Years of sacrifice erased because one bill went unpaid, one luxury item could not be bought. And those who deliver such injustice, the cruel truth, are the very people they love most. My son that morning still carried the same arrogant face. He did not greet me, did not look at me, just buried himself in his phone. I knew he was texting his friends, planning nights out, planning to spend. He had no idea that every dollar he threw away on those pleasures was carved out of my blood, sweat, and shortened years of life. He did not know, or perhaps he chose not to know. All he remembered was the proud sentence from last night. "You don't pay my bills. You're not my dad anymore." I asked myself, whose fault is it? Mine for hiding my wounds, my debts, my sacrifices to give them peace? Or the fault of a society where money has become the measure of a man's worth? If you are hearing this, ask yourself, are you treating your father, your husband, your brother fairly? Or are you too turning them into machines built to print money? And when the machine breaks, you are ready to throw it away. I remember when I was 40, my back already began to fail after years of carrying loads. A doctor once warned me, if you continue, your spine will break completely. But I went on because my child needed tuition paid, because my wife demanded a life as good as anyone else's. I chose silence and endurance. And now, at over 50, what I have received is the rejection of my son and the cold indifference of my wife. Is there any greater injustice than this? When men are young, they are praised for carrying burdens. When they age, they are despised for losing strength. When they are silent, they are accused of being emotionless. When they speak, they are told they are weak. Are men born only to carry and to be scolded? How many men are living in that endless loop, unseen by anyone? Do you not feel angry when you think of a man breaking his back under the sun, only to return home to cold rice and contemptuous eyes? Do you not feel sorrow when fathers who gave their lives so their children could stand tall are denied by those same children, looked down upon by the very wives they supported. I believe if you have a heart, you cannot sit still when you hear this, and that is why I speak to call you to look again at your own family. Do not wait until a man collapses. Do not wait until he is silent forever before realizing his worth. Value him now while you still can. I once thought injustice only happened in society. But no, injustice is crueler when it happens inside the family. Because in society, you can fight back, you can walk away. In the family, you are bound by love, by responsibility, and so you endure longer, harder, deeper. The moment my son turned his back, the moment my wife remained indifferent, I realized I was not only a man being despised, I was a witness to the injustice that thousands of fathers were also bearing. And if I stayed silent, I would only help that cycle continue. So today, through this story, I want to tell you, the one listening, do not let your father, your husband, your brother become invisible. Give them the fairness they deserve. Give them the gratitude they need. Do not let injustice inside the family kill the love that should bind us. When the injustice in my family became clearer and clearer, I realized the only thing keeping me tied to this house was memory. Memory, like slow-motion films, reminded me that everything I had done was not to be denied, but so that I could at least know I had once fought with everything I had for this family. Sitting alone in the quiet room, I closed my eyes, and it was as if my whole youth came rushing back. I remembered being a young man in my 20s, strong and full of dreams. My friends were leaving for school abroad, some starting businesses, some traveling the world. And me, I chose to throw myself into heavy labor. Not because I was lesser, but because my family needed me. My father was sick, my mother frail. If I didn't work, the whole family would collapse. I began with the smallest jobs: construction helper, porter at the market, waiting tables at the diner. Days spent carrying loads, nights washing dishes, returning home late, my shoulders bruised, my hands blistered, yet inside I carried the belief: if I kept pushing, my family would not fall. I told myself, I am young, I can bear it. And indeed, I bore it, year after year. Then I got married. I thought this would be the turning point, gaining a companion to share the burdens. But reality was different. She loved beauty, loved luxury, loved to show off with friends. At first I thought, it's fine. As long as she's happy, I'll work harder. But over time, the demands grew. I remember once, when I had only a few dollars left, I had to choose between buying medicine for my sick father or a new dress for my wife. I chose the medicine. That night she was silent, but her eyes were full of reproach. From then on, I understood. My path would never be easy, but the hardest part was not the work. It was the collapses. Once, while unloading cargo at the dock, I slipped, and the crate crushed me. The pain was so sharp I couldn't breathe. But when I woke up in the hospital, the first thought was, I cannot rest too long. The bills aren't paid. My child still needs me. I checked out early, hiding my condition, and returned to work. From then on, my back ached constantly, but I never complained. I remember nights coming home, while my wife applied makeup to go to parties. I quietly sat repairing my son's torn shoes. I remember cold winter mornings, when we couldn't afford heating. I wrapped an extra coat around my son, leaving myself to freeze. I remember meals where I pushed the meat onto my wife's and son's plates, eating only rice and broth. If you are a father, a husband, you know what I mean. These are not grand acts, but silent sacrifices repeated day after day. And painfully, these things became invisible. Children grew up never knowing. A wife by my side never understanding. Until one day, all those memories were erased by a cruel sentence. You don't pay my bills. You're not my dad anymore. I share these memories not to boast, but to remind you look at your father. Behind his silence is a lifetime of endurance. Every wrinkle, every callus, every drop of sweat is worth more than any luxury item. Don't wait until it's too late to see. Some may ask, why didn't you speak up sooner? Why let your wife and son disrespect you for so long? My answer, because we middle-aged men often choose silence. Silence not out of weakness, but to protect. Silence to keep peace, to shield children from worry. But too much silence turns you into a shadow. And shadows are easy to forget, easy to dismiss. I know many of you hearing this have done the same. You hide your tears to keep your dignity. You hide your wounds so your family doesn't worry. You hide your fatigue so your children believe everything is fine. But that hiding makes you misunderstood, misjudged, disrespected. And when truth finally comes, sometimes it's too late. My memories are filled with races against time. I once worked 2 shifts in a row, 36 hours straight, just to pay off a deadline debt. I donated blood multiple times, not only from kindness, but also to get a little money for home. I sold the old car that carried my youth, just to buy textbooks for my child. Each decision, I thought I was right. But now, as my son denies me, I see sacrifice, if unseen, is as if it never existed. That is why I want to give you listening now this message. Don't let your parents' memories turn invisible. Ask them, how did you live back then? What did you go through? Listen, because in those stories you will see love greater than any words. And more importantly, you will avoid the mistake my son made, the mistake of belittling the sacrifices that built his life. As I sat reliving it all, I realized those memories are both pain and strength. Pain because they were forgotten. Strength because they gave me reason to keep going. And I believe, one day, when the truth comes out, those memories I hold will become undeniable proof of a father's love. The flood of memories left me both choked with emotion and burning with anger. I had sacrificed an entire lifetime, yet in return received nothing but forgetfulness and denial. And the most painful truth was that all of this was not in the past. It was happening now, raw and unrelenting, every single day inside the very house I built. When I opened my eyes after those recollections, reality struck me like a slap. My wife still obsessed with makeup and perfume, still indifferent to my presence. My son still spent recklessly, still arrogant whenever money was mentioned, as if I had never once held any value. Everything seemed to challenge me. You are only a shadow. You only matter when you still bring in money. At night, when the house fell asleep, I lay awake. I stared at the dark ceiling, listened to the fan creak, and inside me, a fire of rage roared. I tried to restrain it, whispering to myself, "Stay silent, don't stir up more conflict." But the more I restrained, the tighter the knot in my chest became. I felt my chest constrict, my breath quicken, my hands clench. I knew that if I continued this way, I would end up destroying myself. How many men have lived like this? Outwardly wearing calm faces, but inside carrying a storm of resentment they could never speak. They return home from work, see wives indifferent, children contemptuous, but still force a smile. They are wounded, but do not complain, for fear of being called weak. And this endless silence has killed countless men's hearts. I sat there in the quiet room and asked myself, am I still the master of my own life? Or am I a prisoner, shackled by duty, by responsibility, by ungrateful stares? The answer choked me. I had lost the right to speak in my own family. I was pushed into a corner, not by violence, but by indifference, by scorn. And sometimes indifference is more cruel than any beating. Once I tried to advise my son about spending. I said, "You should save. Don't waste too much." He only laughed, giving me a contemptuous glance. "What do you know? You can't even support me, so don't lecture me." Those words were another knife deep into my heart. I wanted to scream, to tell him everything I had done for him, but again I restrained myself. I was afraid that if I spoke in anger, I would lose everything, so I chose silence again. But this silence was no longer for the sake of protecting my family. It was because I was exhausted. I knew this endurance was turning me into someone invisible. I had no voice, no place, no respect left. Have you ever felt like me? Have you ever been pushed to the edges of your own family? Have you ever been belittled by your children, disregarded by your spouse, until you asked yourself, do I still have meaning? If you have, then you know how suffocating this resentment can be. It not only kills faith, but gnaws at every piece of the heart. There were nights I wanted to leave. I thought, if I disappear, maybe they will realize my worth. But then I couldn't. I loved this family too much, loved enough to accept being trampled, wounded, as long as they were safe. And that only made my anguish heavier. Why does love become shackles? Why does sacrifice become meaningless? I know there are many men listening to this who are the same. They sit silently in the corner of their houses, eyes far away, hearts full of resentment, but their mouths only say, "It's fine." I want to tell them, don't stay silent forever. Don't let injustice erase you. Because if we don't speak, the truth will remain buried, and the next generations will repeat the same mistakes. I tell this story not just to release my heart, but to sound an alarm. If you are a child, look at your father. If you are a wife, look at your husband. Do not mistake his silence for indifference. Do not mistake his endurance for uselessness. Because inside there may be an ocean of resentment rising. And when it breaks, the consequences will be beyond anyone's control. My resentment did not come only from my son's words, from my wife's indifference. It came from the injustice of an entire man's life. Giving without recognition, sacrificing without appreciation, loving without being loved in return. That is the deepest pain. And today, as I sit here telling you this, I want you to ask yourself, are you also creating such injustice in your own family? Are you disrespecting the ones who gave everything for you? If the answer is yes, stop. Do not let them die slowly in silence. Do not let injustice become the invisible knife cutting into the hearts of fathers, husbands, brothers. After endless nights drowning in suppressed fury and suffocating resentment, I thought everything would just continue like that. I stayed silent. They despised me, and family life kept spinning in that cruel loop. But life sometimes brings turning points when you least expect them. That day, I came home earlier than usual. The sun was still blazing outside, but inside me there was only a dark weight. As I stepped in, I heard my son speaking loudly in the living room, his voice full of panic. "Dad, they sent the notice already. If I don't pay this week, I'll be kicked out of the dorm." I looked at the paper on the table, the bright red stamp striking me like a punch in the eye. I said nothing, but inside my head a storm was raging. This same boy who only recently declared I was not his father, who humiliated me for not paying his bills, was now trembling over a debt. My wife came out from the kitchen, her tone sharp. "Look at this. Our son is about to lose his place at school. Are you just going to sit there, useless as always?" Those words poured oil onto the fire. In that moment, I felt anger, bitterness, and resolve all at once. Anger at the injustice, bitterness at the raw truth, but resolve because I knew I could not let my son lose his future. I quietly went into the bedroom, opened a drawer, and pulled out a document I had hidden for months. It was the certificate of sale for our old house, the home that had been our family's shelter for years. It no longer belonged to us. I had already completed the paperwork in secret to scrape together enough money to cover his tuition. I had never told anyone because I did not want my sacrifice to become a burden in their eyes. But now I knew it was time for the truth to surface. When I walked out with the paper in my hand, the whole house froze. My son's eyes widened, disbelief etched across his face. My wife's mouth fell open, her makeup unable to hide her shock. I laid the document on the table, my voice slow but firm. "This is the answer. You think I'm useless? This is the price I paid so you could stay in school, so this family would not collapse. No one spoke. The air seemed frozen. I saw my son's eyes tremble, his lips moving but no words coming out. My wife shifted uneasily, turning away, unable to meet my gaze. In that moment, for the first time in years, I no longer felt like a shadow. I felt like a man, a father, a husband forcing his family to face the truth. And more surprising still, in my son's eyes, I saw the arrogance crumble for the first time. Gone was the smug look. Gone the contemptuous smile. In its place were confusion, fear, and a faint spark of regret. I realized then that sometimes it takes a devastating shock for people to wake up. But for me, it was not just about revealing a piece of paper or numbers. It was about revealing an entire life of sacrifice. I did not need praise. I did not need to be called a hero. I only needed the truth acknowledged, that I had lived, that I had given, that I had carried, and that I had never abandoned them. Have you ever been in my place, carrying burdens your whole life, only to be scorned? Until one day you could no longer remain silent, and had to show proof. And when you laid down the proof, the truth stunned your whole family into silence. If you have, you know the feeling, both painful and relieving. Painful because you must expose those you love. Relieving because finally you are no longer denied. I want to tell those listening to my story this. Sometimes you cannot stay silent forever. There are moments when the truth must speak, not to seek revenge, but to save the very love within the family. If not, silence will kill it all. The moment I laid down that certificate of sale, I knew I had crossed a line. I was no longer the man enduring in the shadows. I had forced my family to confront the true cost of their indifference. And from here, everything would change. Whatever direction it took, I was no longer afraid, because I knew, at last, the truth had been spoken. The moment the certificate of the house sale lay on the table, the room froze as if encased in ice. I looked at my son, I looked at the wife I had once placed all my trust in, and I saw confusion etched deep in their eyes. But I knew the truth was not contained in just one piece of paper. Behind it was an entire world of silent sacrifices I had buried, and today they needed to be uncovered. I walked back into my room, pulled out an old wooden box worn at the edges. It was where I kept everything that represented a lifetime of toil. I placed it on the table, opened the lid. Bundles of papers, faded hospital files, dead records yellowed with age appeared before their eyes. My son stared wide-eyed. My wife covered her mouth as though she were seeing something she had never imagined. I picked up the first bundle of debt slips, my voice sinking low. These are the loans I took to pay your tuition. You thought you entered a good school by luck? I worked 3 shifts on construction sites, and it still wasn't enough, so I had to borrow from loan sharks. I never told you, because I didn't want you to feel like a burden. But do you know, every number written here was another night I couldn't sleep. I lifted the hospital file next. These are my medical records. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with severe spinal herniation. The doctor told me to quit working or I would end up crippled. But I kept going because this family needed money. I swallowed painkillers, clenched my teeth through the agony, and hid it from you all. Every meal you had without worry was a night I endured pain so fierce I could barely breathe. I pulled out a blood donation certificate. These are times I gave blood. People praised me as generous. But the truth is, many times I went just to get a small stipend. Some mornings I donated blood, afternoons I carried bricks. I never told anyone because I didn't want pity. I wanted to keep my dignity. But today I must show you how much I traded away. I opened an old envelope. Inside were faded photos. In them, a younger me in a cement-stained safety jacket, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. I handed one to my son. This is your father, not the useless man you called me. This is your father, the man who carried cement bags and bricks so you could have a peaceful childhood. My son's hands trembled as he held the photo. I saw his eyes redden, his lips pressed tight. Perhaps for the first time, he was truly seeing a part of my life he had never known. I pulled out another loan contract, this one with my wife's signature. I looked directly at her. Do you remember when you wanted to open a beauty salon who co-signed the loan with you? That shop closed after a few months, and I carried the debt alone. Did you ever mention it? Did you ever once look at me with gratitude, or only with reproach and scorn? My wife's face drained of color. She could not speak, her eyes darted away, her hands trembling with shame. I knew at that moment she too was being forced to confront the truth she had ignored. I gathered all the papers, my voice rising in the silent room. This is my life. A life eroded by labor, by debts, by wounds unseen. And you, my son, my wife, you treated it all as invisible. You thought I was weak, useless, but it was this weakness that held the family together. It was this uselessness that gave my children an education, that gave my wife a comfortable life. I saw my son's head bow low, his shoulders shaking. My wife collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. No one had the courage to argue, because truth, once revealed, cannot be denied. I continued, my voice tight with grief but resolute. If I had not opened this box tonight, perhaps even until my last day, you would still see me as nothing but a shadow. But I cannot let the truth remain buried. I have sacrificed, and I deserve to be acknowledged. I do not ask for praise. I only ask for fairness. You, listening to this story, do you understand that pain? The pain of a father, a husband, who spent a lifetime breaking his back, only to be denied. Are you letting your parents live in silence, in disregard, just because they no longer bring home as much money? If so, stop. Ask them, what did you go through for us? Give them the gratitude they deserve. The truth, no matter how painful, must be spoken. And that night, in that small room, I laid it all bare. No more secrets, no more hiding. I forced my wife and son to look straight at the sacrifices they had dismissed as nothing. And I knew, from that moment, my family would never be the same again. The air in the room felt solidified after I laid down the debt slips, the hospital files, the blood donation certificates. My wife and my son sat there in silence, avoiding my eyes. But I knew the time had come when no one could run anymore. The truth had been revealed, and now they had to face it, face me. I took a deep breath and looked straight at my son. He still kept his head down, his shoulders trembling slightly. I spoke, my voice firm, and no longer the choked whispers of resentment it once was. Lift your head up. Don't hide from your father. I want you to look me in the eye and answer me. When you said, you don't pay my bills, you're not my dad anymore, did you realize you erased an entire lifetime of sacrifice? My son slowly raised his head. His eyes were red, his lips quivering, but no words came. I pressed on, not letting him find excuses. Who do you think paid those bills all these 18 years? Who carried wounds without ever telling anyone? Who gave you school, gave you a childhood you thought just existed by itself? Tell me, who did all of that? He stayed silent, tears now rolling down his cheeks. In that moment, I knew this was the first time he had been forced to look directly at the truth he had long ignored. I turned to my wife, my eyes sharp as blades. And you, do you remember this loan slip? Do you remember when you said you needed capital for a salon? Who signed with you? That shop failed in months, and I carried the debt alone. Did you ever once turn to me and say thank you? Or was it always reproach and contempt? My wife froze. Her hands clutched her skirt tightly, trembling. I had never seen her so fragile. The makeup on her face could not hide her shame. Her once straight posture curled in on itself as if the whole world had collapsed around her. I looked back at both of them, my voice breaking, but every word steady. You forgot who I am. I am not a shadow in this house. I am not a money machine to be discarded when empty. I am a husband, a father, a man who carried this family on his shoulders for decades. The silence was so deep I could hear the clock ticking. My daughter, the quiet child who had sat in silence all along, suddenly burst into tears. She ran to me, clutched me tightly, sobbing, "Father, I'm sorry. I always knew you worked hard, but I never imagined you suffered this much." Her cry was like a blade slicing through the suffocating silence, and it broke my son as well. He fell to his knees in front of me, his voice cracked and broken. "Dad, I was wrong. I didn't know. I truly didn't know." Seeing that, my heart clenched. I had waited too long for this moment, the moment my family had to face the truth, had to face what they had denied. But I did not feel triumph. Instead, there was only a profound sadness in me, because to reach this moment, I had endured a lifetime of scorn. I placed my hand on my son's shoulder, squeezed gently, speaking through tears. "I don't need you to kneel. I only need you to understand that I never abandoned you. Even if it meant losing my health, even if it meant selling our home, I did it, only so you would have a future. Never forget that." Then I turned to my wife, my voice lower but still firm. "And you, look at the truth. You drowned yourself in makeup, in parties, and forgot who kept this family alive. You can blame me for being poor, for not giving you luxury, but don't you ever again call me useless. If I had truly been useless, this family would have fallen apart long ago." My wife's face was streaked with tears. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. In that moment, I felt invisible no longer. I had risen, forcing them to finally see me with real eyes. No more denial, no more pretense. This was the moment of confrontation, the moment truth was laid bare, and those who once dismissed me had no place to hide. You, hearing this story, have you ever been in my place? Have you ever once been forced to lay it all out, to make your family see your worth? Painful, but the only way to keep love from suffocating. If you are still silent, I urge you, stand up. Do not let the truth stay buried. Do not remain a shadow in your own house. That night, I knew my family had changed. No more contemptuous looks, no more scornful words. In their place were silence, tears, and unspoken acknowledgement. And I understood, sometimes, for love to survive, there must be a moment of confrontation like this. After the moment of confrontation, the room sank into heavy silence. My son knelt at my feet. My wife collapsed into a chair. My daughter still clung to me, sobbing. But I knew that if things were not to fall back into the same cycle, if they were to truly remember what I had endured, I had to do more. I had to speak the words I had buried for a lifetime, to turn invisible wounds into undeniable testimony. I straightened my back, my shoulders trembling with emotion. Slowly, I rolled up my sleeves. Scars crisscrossed my thin arms, the marks of years of labor, until exhaustion. I pulled up my pant legs, exposing my deformed, hardened knees, long since ruined. I looked directly at my son, my voice clear and unwavering. "Do you see this? This is the weakness you spoke of. These scars, every drop of blood, every ache, all of it, was so you could live in peace." He sobbed, reaching out to touch the scars, but pulled back as if afraid they might burn him. I continued, louder now, addressing the entire family. "You call me useless. If useless means bleeding for this family, I will choose useless. If weakness means giving my life for my children, I will choose weakness." The room shuddered with those words. No longer was it choked silence, no longer suppressed resentment, but a public declaration. I could feel my heart pounding hard, ready to explode. But this time it was not anger. It was the strength of a man standing up to affirm his worth. My wife burst into sobs, stammering, I never knew. I never saw." I looked straight at her, my tone sharp. "You did not want to know. You chose parties over staying by my side. You chose dresses over seeing me collapse after long shifts. You may have forgotten, but this body did not forget. Then I turned to my son, my voice softer but still firm. My son, I do not blame you. Youth is impulsive and arrogant, I understand. But I need you to remember, true strength is not in bills paid, but in the silent sacrifices that keep a family alive. One day, when you are a father, you will understand. He broke down completely, burying his face in the floor, tears streaming, sobs choking him. I knew, at that moment, the wall of arrogance had finally been shattered. I drew a deep breath and spoke again, this time as if addressing not only my family but anyone who might hear this story. How many men have lived like me? How many fathers, husbands are despised in their own homes? It is time to speak the truth openly. It is time to stop hiding scars and sacrifices. Because if truth is not spoken, love will wither under injustice. The room echoed with weeping, but within that grief I saw a glimmer of light, the light of change, of realization, of repentance, and above all, the light of fairness I had waited for all my life. I sat down, placed my hand gently on my son's shoulder, then looked at my wife and daughter. From this day I do not need pretty words. I only need respect. I only need you to remember that every time you look at me, you are looking at a lifetime of sacrifice. Never again let me become a shadow. That was the climax. The moment I was no longer the man silently enduring, but a father, a husband, a human being openly affirming the truth. And from that moment, my family would never be the same again. After I spoke those final words in the climax, the room was filled with sobs. My wife buried her head and cried uncontrollably. My son knelt trembling at my feet like a lost child, and my daughter clung tightly to me, her small hand gripping my shirt as if afraid I might vanish. In that moment I felt it clearly. The wall separating me from my family had collapsed. But what remained was a heavy emptiness, regret, and apologies that had never been spoken. My son lifted his head, his eyes swollen and red, his voice trembling. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong, so wrong. I was blind, selfish. I only thought of myself. I never imagined you had to endure all this. I don't deserve to call myself your son." He buried his face against my knees, crying as he had never cried before. That cry was no longer defiance, no longer arrogance, but the complete collapse of a heart that had been awakened. I placed my calloused hand on his head, stroked gently, my voice deep but warm. "My son, no father wants his child to kneel. I don't need endless apologies. I only need you to remember that I never abandoned you, and I never will." I looked into his eyes and saw shining within them repentance and a longing to start over. For the first time in many years, I saw the child he once was innocent, in need of his father, grateful returning in that gaze. My wife raised her face too, her cheeks streaked with mascara, her voice broken. "Husband, I was wrong. I chased false lights, forgetting the true light came from you, the one who lit the lamp for this home. I was selfish, blind. Please forgive me." I looked at her for a long time. For years, I had resented her indifference, her carelessness. But now, seeing her cry and admit her mistakes, what I felt was not anger, but relief. I sighed, saying, "I don't need fancy apologies. I only need you, from now on, to see me as a human being, a husband, a father. Don't let me become a shadow again." She nodded repeatedly, tears rolling down. I knew, in that moment, regret had truly reached her heart. My daughter, the only one who had always stood silently by my side, held my hand and said, through tears, "Father, now they understand. You no longer have to bear everything alone. I promise I will always be by your side. Always remember all that you've done." Hearing her words, warmth spread in me. It was a vow, a thread of connection assuring me that from now on I was not alone. The air in the room began to change. From heavy and tense, it softened into a silence, where each person sank into their own thoughts. My son still knelt there, but this time not to apologize, but to promise. Dad, I will change. I will learn to become a man like you. I smiled, my eyes blurred with tears. I answered, My son, I don't want you to become like me. I only want you to know how to cherish what you have, to love and sacrifice when it is needed. If you can do that, I am fulfilled. In that moment, I felt reconciliation sprouting. No more harsh words, no more contemptuous glances. Instead, there were tears, promises, and a new beginning. You who are listening to this story, do you see your own family here? Have you ever hurt your parents without realizing it? Have you ever dismissed their silent sacrifices because you thought them natural? If you have, do not wait until it is too late. Say sorry, say thank you, while they are still here to hear it. That night, in a room full of tears, I knew my family had stepped into a new chapter. Not yet perfect, not all wounds healed, but at least regret and reconciliation had touched our hearts. And that was the beginning of true love's return. After that night full of tears, my small house seemed to wear a new atmosphere. The same 4 familiar walls, the same old wooden table, the same ceiling fan creaking every evening. But gone was the cold silence and the contemptuous looks. In their place, I saw change in every glance, every gesture, every word from my loved ones. The next morning I woke to find breakfast already prepared. Not me brewing tea as usual. My daughter rushed out saying, Dad, I made fried eggs for you today. They are not as good as yours, but please eat them. I smiled, my eyes stinging. My son also stepped forward, awkwardly placing a small envelope on the table. Dad, this is money I saved from working part-time. I want to help. I know it's nothing compared to what you sacrificed, but I want to start over. I looked at him and saw sincerity in his eyes. No longer arrogance, but the eyes of a young man learning to grow up. I nodded and said softly, I don't need money. I only need you to live responsibly, to love. That is the greatest repayment. My wife approached as well, carrying a bowl of porridge, setting it gently down. Eat this, to ease your back pain. From now on, I won't let you be alone anymore. Simple words, but I knew they were a promise. For the first time in years, I saw her truly look at me as a person, a husband, a father, not a shadow. In the days that followed, not everything was perfect. There were still moments of carelessness from my wife, still flare-ups of temper from my son. But the difference was they no longer belittled me. They paused, they listened, they apologized. And those small changes turned the house from a place of heaviness into a place of warmth. One evening, as we sat together, I said slowly, Family is not a place for judgment, but a place for love. I don't need you to honor me. I only ask that you remember. True strength is not in muscles, nor in money, but in the scars we carry for those we love. My son nodded, tears in his eyes. Dad, I understand. Before, I thought paying bills was strength. Now I know strength is sacrificing for family. My wife whispered, I chased after illusions, but I will change. From now on, I want to walk with you, with our children, to rebuild this home. Hearing those words, I felt light inside. Years of bitterness, of sleepless nights, replaced by understanding. You, listening to the story I tell you, never mistake the silence of your parents as uselessness. Do not wait until the truth is revealed to regret. Look at them now. Be grateful now. Because once time has passed, some words of thanks, some tears, will never again have a chance to be given. My story is not to boast, but to remind. I was once despised, called weak, useless. But today I stand here to say, it is those so-called weak ones, those silent ones, who are the true pillars. And if you have a father like that, never let him become a shadow. Finally, I looked at my children, looked at my wife, my voice warm and steady. Strength is not always in victory. Sometimes strength is in the scars we carry for love. And I am proud of these scars. The family fell silent. Then we all cried together. But this time they were not tears of bitterness or regret, but tears of love and reconciliation. And so, after everything, my family found each other again. No more shadows, no more cruel words, only respect, love, and a home that truly deserved the name.